Before we dive deep today, don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoy learning about history. It's just a simple click that helps us bring a lot more fascinating stories your way. You're bound in, can't move. One water droplet on your forehead, another, not painful at first, cold and wet. But when hours arrive and become hours, you know something is wrong. You can't sit up. You can't turn the drips off. They just drip on one spot all day, every day, forevermore. The flames start. The dripping water's a concerto, clashing in your brain. Your brain bursts, screaming for pity. Weeks go, then weeks. Sleeping's a dream. Your mind's destroyed, your inner beat destroyed. And your brain finally snaps. This was one of the most famous Middle Ages torture devices. Water torture. Hold on for the worst of it. This was not torture during the Middle Ages' worst abuse of water in the Middle Ages. There were some worse than this. The Middle Ages were an age of harsh justice. Crime and punishment were not the domain of reform. They were the domain of pain, shame, and fear. Torture ran rife, not just to elicit a confession from a person, but to make an example of the rest of mankind. Shame this regime, and it could have been you. Water, a substance otherwise life-giving, was a tool of mental and physical torment. One, and the most well-known of water torture techniques, was Chinese water torture. Not Chinese, however, as one might want to think after considering the name. First described in 16th century Europe by an Italian jurist, Hippolytus de Marsilius, the victim's head, arm, and legs were restrained. Then a slow, steady dripping of water would be dripped onto his forehead, always in the same place. It was nothing initially, water, but the incessant dripping were translated into agonies. The skin became sensitive, then raw. The incessant hammering threw the internal clock of the victim out of whack, so seconds took an eternity. To stay still was adding to the agonies. No relief, no way of stopping the water, no way of turning off their own agonies. Worst of all, it wasn't the torture that killed them. It was the slow, deliberate destruction of their own mind. Most of the victims totally lost their minds before their torturers even got to them. Where Chinese water torture battered at the mind, another method, the water cure, hurt at the body. This was used anywhere on earth by the Spanish Inquisition and consisted of forcibly forcing huge amounts of water into the throat of a victim. The procedure worked as follows. 1. The victim was strapped up and not even permitted to shift position. 2. Something was pushed into the mouth, or else a funnel shoved down the gullet. 3. Continuous pouring in of water far beyond the normal capacity of the stomach. They had begun as mere gagging and thrashing, and now would simply not release. They bit agonizingly harder on their stomach, forcing the inner material to bulge outward. The tightening grip was so phenomenally tight that they knew their insides would burst. And if so, their slaughter, they'd empty the gob. Too often, however, abuse would just go on and on until the belly of their insides burst within them, screaming, agonizing, slow death. Even survivors were traumatized. Deeply within, their bodies irrevocably harmed by what had been done to them. If water torture was dunking, a treatment intended to push victims to the brink of life repeatedly, bound to a wooden board, thrashing in and out of ice water repeatedly, they pushed them down until their lungs began gasping for air, their body shuddering in horror. Struggling barely at all, they were yanked up once more, gasping, gagging, choking. Inequality, either. They went back to thrown on the ground again. This was particularly common with witch trials. If the witch can't be murdered by drowning repeatedly, then she's certainly guilty. If they did drown, then they were innocent. Nothing more than dead, that is. And to put the icing on the cake in this instance is that water torture didn't end with the Middle Ages. The FIA, water cure, was utilized in the Philippine-American War, 1899 to 1902. When American soldiers made their prisoners drink water until they would swell and stomped on them in expectation of their water body vomiting out deep from within their system. The method gradually developed into waterboarding, the method that we now employ. Rather than drowning the victim, water is poured down his throat in such a manner as to simulate suffocation, shouting at the victim the same terror that actual drowning induces. What is most intimidating is that medieval torturers' own methods, executed centuries ago, are reused. It puts you into context. How far have we progressed then? Water is life. It is what keeps us alive, sustains us, and breathes for us. But in the unwanted arms, it is a weapon of terror. The Middle Ages were awful, but we do have a history lesson here where human beings learned nothing whatsoever about fear except for control. And it wasn't finished at that in medieval dungeons. From witch trials to wars of imprisonment, from the Inquisition to contemporary spy agencies. We do the same, call it what we like. What does this tell us? Are we that ignorant of history? Or are we perhaps smarter about how we rationalize violence? I'd appreciate your comment on that now. Is medieval torture all about extracting confessions from people, or was it perhaps an effort to frighten them? And do you think our cultures today really moved beyond that sort of thing, or merely learned how to upgrade the way it is achieved? If you enjoyed this ride through the ages, subscribe and like for more stories from the backrooms of the past. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you can proceed to the next chapter. In the meantime, be curious and question history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the darkest and most fascinating corners of history. Comment below. Please hit that like button. It's just an easy way to help us create more content for you.